Grandmaster is clearly the most coveted rank in all of Overwatch. To achieve Grandmaster is to achieve greatness for a lot of players, but how does one do it? No matter what FPS game it is, reaching the top is a difficult task. However, they all follow a similar 3-step improvement process, so let's get right into it. Hitting the top 1% is hard. No one said it was easy, but I have streamlined the process into 3 steps: refining mechanics and mentality, understanding individual character activation, and putting it all together. Notice how step 1 is called refining and not perfecting your mechanics and mentality. Perfecting sets in the idea that players need to be godly at their characters right away as soon as they start playing, which is simply not reasonable. You will never be perfect at aiming, movement, positioning, and rotations all at the same time. That's right, even pro players aren't perfect. This step is an ongoing process that takes time and patience. At the end of the day, GM wasn't meant to be obtained incredibly fast. Mechanics are all about those things that you can do individually and how proficient you are at accomplishing the tasks you set out to complete. This encompasses everything from movement to aim to character cooldown usage. Let's break it down. Aim is pretty simple. Put the crosshair on body or head and click. Well, obviously it isn't that easy. How does one get better at this skill? Practice. There are codes like Vaxta in game, and even external aim trainers like Kovacs that can help your aim, but what is the best way to use these tools? Aiming in game helps you get acquainted with the hitboxes and movement patterns you will see throughout your climb, as well as the projectile speeds on your character if that applies. This is why I typically recommend about half an hour of code Vaxta a day on hard mode. It does wonders for your aim. On the flip side, aim trainers don't necessarily directly help you with aiming in game, but more specifically with mouse control, which usually has a positive impact. This is why I consider third-party applications as good warm-ups or cooldowns and not something the bulk of your time should go into unless you really enjoy it. You have to understand that nothing beats practicing within the real thing, especially if your character pool has unique projectiles. I will link an aim video I have made in the past going much more in depth on this concept if you are all interested. Moving on, cooldown usage is really hard to discuss broadly. What I may suggest is looking up the specific characters you want to learn on YouTube to find guides. I've made great comprehensive guides on all of the supports Overwatch has to offer, but there are resources for every hero in the game if you choose to look for it. This is what I suggest for anyone that is looking to level up their improvement process. If you already have looked at guides for your characters though, and are still struggling with playing them into different situations, the rest of today's video will help you out immensely. In short, it is all about making sure that you think about how the enemy reacts to your character existing in the game. If you are playing Zenyatta, playing against double sniper is a lot different than that of 2 flankers. You can play much more aggressively against one as compared to the other, assuming your Brig isn't doing God's work. Lastly, and most importantly, mentality. This is by far the most important idea to improve upon before you start hard grinding. You are only as strong as your mental strength, especially in Overwatch. The moment you snap is the moment you lose hundreds, if not thousands of SR and vice versa. Overwatch is a mental game. Sure, brute force movement and aim can carry you a long way, but if you don't know what is going on in tilt, you will simply lose. It is so important that you hold on to that growth mindset in everything you do, not just in game. Out of all of my students, the ones that always take a step back, breathe, and see what they could have done better every game always climb the furthest and the fastest. Even if your teammates are completely feeding, oftentimes there is something you could do better, but in this step, it is important to practice just not tilting first. Don't overload yourself. Get into a rhythm within a self-improvement mindset with a positive mental attitude. This alone will give you the strength you need to pass most ranks into Diamond. Then, once you have learned what makes you tick as well as what works, start reflecting on your gameplay and learn in whichever way works for you. I just want to reiterate 2 things though. This whole step is ongoing and isn't something to get stuck up on. If Overwatch is your first FPS game, this will take a lot longer to get to the base recommended level as compared to an FPS veteran. It is still incredibly important and something that you can never ignore. You always have to increase your individual skills on the characters you play so that you don't fall behind. Let's move on to step 2 of the process that covers each character and how they want to play individually. While this part of the video may seem simple for all you veteran players out there, However, it's not so simple for new players. The reason why this is important to know though is that it can help you learn how to use cooldowns in different situations. It isn't the same every time, but by understanding how different characters want to play intrinsically, you can get more out of your own cooldowns more consistently as opposed to just memorizing how they work. So while this portion is mostly macro based in the understanding of the game, it can still help you with your micro actions. That being said, if you don't want to listen to every character's playstyle, I have all of the heroes named in the description to make navigating the content you want to see easier. Let's start off with the tank role's fan favorite though, Reinhardt. Reinhardt is the face of close range engagements. He excels when swinging his massive hammer, dealing exceptional cleave damage to many enemies point blank. Rein is incredibly simple: get up close, force a brawl, win, rinse and repeat. Zarya is a character that is often misunderstood. Many players believe that she is best played when paired with a Reinhardt, but that just isn't always the case. She doesn't enjoy pressing W at all times, but rather when she has built the charge to do so. Zarya still enjoys getting up close and personal, but just needs a little bit more time to do it. If you're looking to engage quickly, D.va is your pick. That's because D.va can do it all. While she excels at being fast with her team, it isn't the end of the world if she needs to rotate her supports elsewhere first. You can't get too slow, however, because then you begin to run into problems as double shield compositions will easily be able to poke you out. She is efficient at multitasking in the front line, backline, and subduing the threat that DPS provide, especially hit scans, Echo, and Pharah. To do all of this, however, the player needs to have a very good understanding of the game. Winston isn't no brain, no aim. As a matter of fact, he is all brain. The concept of dive isn't just to jump on the backline whenever you please, it is much more in depth than that. Winston excels at jumping to various high grounds to force enemies away, depleting their cooldowns, and maintaining the newly found space until it is time to surround them and strike. Because of this, he takes a bit more time based on the characters he is surrounded by. He can still jump as aggressively as he wants depending on who he's with. Moira, D.va, and Lucio amplify his speed, while Zarya and Ana slow it down in order to charge up a bit. So he's a pretty interesting scientist. Sigma slows things down quite a bit. His shield isn't as strong as Reinhardt's, so in most situations, he is using it to create strong off angles for his DPS to take advantage of. His damage potential is quite high and can go pretty far as well, so the more time he has, the more lethal he gets. Orisa is another character that benefits from slowing down the fight and weakening her enemies before they get too close. However, she is far better suited to be the anchor for her team. This will all change alongside her rework for Overwatch 2 though. Ball loves to displace the enemy and catch the enemy supports off guard with his slam. CC abilities slow him down quite a bit, but not enough to stop him from being played at the top ranks. At the end of the day, however, he excels at surrounding the enemy, forcing them in the middle of a circle created by the team. Hog is not the anchor for his team. He excels at taking duels by himself away from the team, doing his own thing. The amount of players that treat him like a Reinhardt is baffling. It is important to not play him like something he's not to get the max value out of the piggy. Moving on to DPS, Ashe is very good at poking the enemy, weakening them to the brink of death. She excels when the fight is slowed down, allowing her to do more damage. This is only exacerbated when alongside a Mercy Pocket duo. Bastion is, well, Bastion. He essentially needs to be run with 2 shields unless he wants to flank the whole game. Hence, he plays very stationary and slow. Alongside his rework in Overwatch 2, this can change quite a bit, but let's move on. Torbjorn is a very strong character right now. His turret plays as a sentinel for the backline alongside a strong Brigitte if need be. He can poke slowly from range until it is time to overload and clean up with the brawl on point. Torb is very versatile and can be played in virtually any situation against dive compositions with aggressive flankers to slow down the game for a safer team fight. Doomfist is fast. Really fast. Once an engagement is made, whether it be in the backline or harassing the front line, it's sure to be a swift one. Obviously, how quickly he goes in depends on who he is surrounded by, but generally, it is on the zoom spectrum. The backline always is nervous against the Doomfist. Echo is a threat in the sky that is very flexible. She can be played into virtually any composition and can work, though she doesn't work super well with extremely fast brawl compositions. She still does prefer weakening targets so that she can utilize her beam full potential. Contrary to popular belief, Genji isn't just a flanker. He is a byproduct of the heroes he is surrounded by. While he does succeed in charging up his ultimate for strong slicing combos, his tempo is primarily defined by his dash reset and how his tanks set up kills for him. If he is with a Rein, he will want to play close with the brawl as that is where the damage is. In spam compositions, he will follow the Orisa pull or ball slam, and in dive, he will simply play to surround the enemy. Hanzo can be misunderstood in his uses across many compositions. While he does thrive given extended periods of time, his heavy burst potential provided by storm arrows can be helpful in brawl matchups if the team wants to slow down the game. It also can be beneficial to subdue aggressive dive tanks when he is surrounded by the right teammates. Junkrat excels at sending tons of splash damage to tight areas that teams rotate through. However, since he is not the best character at the moment, different players have to find ways to make him work. No matter what it is, I am not the best Junkrat in the world. If you're looking to learn from the best, there are a ton of players out there that are absolutely nuts at this character, but I personally can vouch for players like Aquamarine and SillyPhil49, who plays for Illinois in Collegiate currently. Cassidy is very bulky. This makes him excel alongside brawly compositions, considering the fact that he meets fall off at a pretty inconvenient range. That being said, if need be, he can be played like a Brig against Doomfist if you absolutely need to. Sometimes support characters don't love playing her even when she is needed. Mei is a lot like Cassidy. She is pretty bulky with her entire kit. She thrives around her team. Building walls correctly always secures kills if follow-up is nearby, and chain freezes will always be more efficient in close range engagements. She can't freeze with her gun in Overwatch 2, but the point still stands. She is an incredible threat point blank. Pharah is the queen of the sky. The longer she can stay there, the harder she can carry. Thus, she likes to play slower in order to find key targets she can directly hit with her rockets, doing increased damage. Once she gets looked at by D.va though, she is pretty difficult to pull off. Reaper is fast. He needs to get up close and personal in order to do, well, anything. Therefore, if he isn't up close and personal by the time the team hasn't taken considerable damage, he will most likely lose the fight. Soldier gets outclassed by virtually every other hit scan in the game in a condensed team matchup, so he needs to use his mobility advantage to close the gap. Thus, Soldier will generally play to flank and take aggressive angles to pressure the enemy from multiple sides. Because of this, he works pretty well in ranked. Sombra is a team player much like that of Winston. She changes heavily based on who she is surrounded by. She doesn't really influence much on her own unless she is trying to assassinate your backline, which may be a problem in Overwatch 2, but with Brig simply existing, it's hard to warrant that. Sim works a lot like Zarya as she needs time to charge up to be effective. At first, Sim needs to be close but not play extremely aggressively in order to make her beam level 3. Then, she does some major damage. This allows her team to pummel through the enemy up close and personal. If she can't get charged up though, she will have a really tough time. Tracer can be played in virtually any composition and changes slightly based on who surrounds her. She can play to take aggressive flanks, but also maintain lane control as well. Overall, she is very versatile and a threat to look out for. To wrap DPS up, Widowmaker is only as good as her line of sight on the fight, so while she may benefit from more time, it isn't too big of a deal. Therefore, the speed isn't really defined by her, but by her team. So long as you're playing within line of sight, Widowmaker is getting value. To close out this portion, let's cover the supports. As Ana, the only thing that sets her apart from other supports is her aggressive utility, especially nade. She needs time in order to maximize her values with anti-nades, as well as charge her nano boost that can sharply turn fights. Baptiste is a jack of all trades. He can play to poke shields all day on spam compositions, but also play to get up close and personal with his stacked healing and immortality field. He does struggle when people aren't playing together or if he is isolated, so he is very weak to D.va compositions, both on his team as well as the enemy. Brigitte is a sentinel on the backline, but doesn't do too well when the enemy runs her down. For being the squire to Reinhardt, you would think that this wouldn't be the case, but she doesn't really give any mobility to her team like Lucio, so that's just how it is. That being said, she is a fantastic pick in any comp that doesn't require a Lucio or Mercy Pocket for a Pharah. Speaking of Lucio though, he is all about getting his team in and out when needed. Therefore, he excels with characters that need to get close and personal early. Reinhardt and Reaper do very well with him because of this. Mercy is a lot slower than Lucio. The only things that set her apart are her survivability and damage boost. So characters like Ashe, Pharah, and Echo pop off the most alongside her. Therefore, the team needs to create time for the DPS to find an opening. Moira has a lot of survivability, but her healing and damage is limited in range. Therefore, she excels with characters that want to be in the enemy's face. Zenyatta's aggression is dependent on the situation. If he is surrounded by a friendly team of double shield, he wants to play far away and poke the enemy until they are dead. However, alongside a Brigitte, he can take aggressive off angles and surround the enemy to kill them swiftly. The incoming kick buff will definitely help him with surviving as well. We've covered each character and how they personally prefer to play, but now it is the time to talk about how that changes when everything is put together. As you know, some characters are intrinsically fast while others are slow. In a perfect world, compositions will consist of heroes that benefit from similar tempos and engagements, but ranked is far from perfect. While Rein does go great with a Lucio, sometimes that player just wants to play Mercy instead, which changes everything. If you don't adapt, you will lose every time. Not understand why, tilt, and the rest is history. Let's start off with a solid brawl composition though. Rein, D.va, Cassidy, Mei, Baptiste, and Lucio. This team plays fast by rotating to favorable positions, walling off targets as Mei, and taking the enemy down in a close range battle. It's not as fast as Brawl with Reaper, Doom, and Moira, but still runs quickly against enemies that aren't mirroring what they are playing, like a spam composition. What do I mean by this? In a Brawl versus Brawl mirror, the faster of the two brawls plays more aggressively than the slower of the two, but a Brawl comp will always play relatively fast against anything that isn't Brawl, no matter what it consists of. Double shield spam compositions will almost always play to take multiple angles and poke the enemy until they fall. This doesn't mean that they will surround the enemy necessarily, just that the pressure will be from a few places. This changes, however, when a D.va is picked over the Sigma. You can't reliably take multiple angles. In this situation, you are playing to poke the enemy until a brawl is forced on point, where you will generally win if you were efficient beforehand. The strength of D.va here is that it is easier to keep the backline alive. Dive compositions are always interesting. Aggressive dives like 6-man include Winston, D.va, Tracer, Sombra, Moira, and Lucio. Slower surrounding dives include Ball, D.va, Tracer, Sombra, Zenyatta, and Brigitte. And the slowest include Winston, Zarya, Ana, and Brig. After watching the previous parts of this guide, this should all make sense in theory. But what if the theory isn't perfect? No matter what, the tanks and supports that are picked generally dictate the way that you should play the game. What if you had a Rein, D.va, Cassidy, Mei, Bap, and then a Mercy that won't switch? How does that affect your playstyle? Can you play as fast as you did before with a Lucio? No, you can't. You don't have the speed anymore. Therefore, while you still want to get up close and personal, you have to be a lot more calculated. Mercy benefits from allowing the DPS time to utilize the damage boost as much as possible. So if this team is playing on King's Row, while before it may have been okay to play on Statue, elongating the fight by forcing them to use speed boost to close the distance on you gives you a better chance of winning. It isn't optimal, but in ladder, this can help when you get one tricks. A bonus tip for this situation is to notice this fast and change your hero accordingly, especially if you are a DPS player. As DPS, you have no excuse to not adapt to every situation given to you. You have 17 options with Sojourn on her way to make that 18. So if you are either of the DPS and you see a player lock Mercy here, a switch to Hanzo can be really strong in order to break the enemy's Rein shield incredibly fast, forcing the enemy to make even cleaner rotations. Moving on, what if you are playing Rein and you have nothing to help you at all? Like I'm talking about Rein with a Ball, Widow, Pharah, Mercy, and Zen. Obviously the Rein should just switch to Sigma or D.va, but what if they're a one trick? You can't really play to Brawl super hard, but you can take the fight on point to force your advantage once the enemy is cornered. What I am getting at is notice how the playstyle you have on a character changes based on what you are surrounded by within your team, but also what the enemy has. So while understanding how your individual character works is important, the difficulty of mastering them within a short amount of time is a bit easier when you set yourself up to think about it rather than bash your way through. So let's flip the picture here. It is important to understand what you are running, but you have to do the same for the enemy. Just because you want to brawl on point all the time doesn't mean you just get to do it because you feel like it. Your execution changes based on what the enemy is running. If the enemy is spamming you, they want to burn you in rotation so that you die before you even get to them. So you can't be lazy in rotations because of this. And utilizing characters like D.va over Zarya is important to play into your win condition while countering theirs. If the enemy is diving you, they want to force your cooldowns out and attack you in rotation. If you can live the initial threat, your chance of success is much higher. Thus, while Baptiste is one of the most picked characters in Brawl, Moira is the better option here. Bap is great for his immortality field, but it will get forced out consistently against dive, and when all your backline needs to do is survive, Moira is just the better option and would work better into the composition. Brawl versus Brawl we talked about earlier, but hopefully this all makes sense. Explaining this concept in one video is like teaching you all of Overwatch in 10 minutes. It's impossible. I hope the common examples I have given you in the series though makes it easier to think through the game rather than just play to play. At the end of the day, the way you improve is by challenging yourself to grow every single day you play. This is only achievable through intense thought into deliberation. It will be slow when you first start incorporating it into your gameplay, but this is the process that works consistently for all the players that have adopted it so far. So long as you understand what your enemy is trying to do to win and play to your win condition better, you will be able to think through all of the situations thrown at you and pull out victories that would have otherwise been lost. As we close out today's video, make sure to recognize the 3-step process we've covered. Understand that these 3 steps are not the answers to Reach GM, but rather guidelines you should follow in order to grow into what it is you want to become. Not everyone is going to go from plat to GM in 2 weeks like Kurovi did. It can take years to achieve this goal. Don't get discouraged and keep working with an improvement mindset. If you ever have any questions regarding your climb in Overwatch 1 as well as Overwatch 2, be sure to join the Discord with a ton of driven players just like you to aid in your climb and maybe even find a duo. I can't wait to see everyone that joins, especially when ranked drops in October for Overwatch 2 this year. Thank you all so much for watching, but until next time, I've got to peace out and Paz out. I'll see you in the next one.